Welcome back, and now with the news in detail. Indian troops have martyred 2 more Kashmiris, raising the toll to 40 this month so far. The civilians were martyred during a cordon and search operation in the Sopore district. Police said the operation is underway in the area. Meanwhile, in another operation, the Indian troops arrested half a dozen youths in different areas of the Budgam district. Indian atrocities in the occupied territories have sharply increased despite the COVID-19 outbreak. The occupied valley has been under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communication blackout for the past 326 days. A U.S. State Department report says Pakistan has taken significant steps to counter terrorist organizations and terror financing. It said there were fewer terror attacks in Pakistan last year compared to 2018, thanks to counter-terrorism operations launched by security forces. It also acknowledged Pakistan made progress towards meeting the requirements of the Financial Action Task Force. The report also hailed Pakistan's positive contribution to the Afghan peace process. Talking about Afghanistan, it said the country continues to experience aggressive and coordinated terrorist attacks by ISIS branch. In Pakistan, the number of deaths from the new coronavirus has surpassed 3,900, with 148 fatalities in the past 24 hours. The health ministry said over 4,000 cases were reported overnight, bringing the total to nearly 193,000. The ministry said over 3,500 people recovered from the virus in the past day, raising the tally to more than 81,000. The ministry said over 107,000 cases are active in the country. It said the province of Punjab reported the most new infections with 1,602 cases. Sindh province reported 1,161 infections, while the capital Islamabad registered 115 new infections. Latin America continues to be the epicenter of COVID-19 as Brazil records 1,185, while Mexico reports 947 deaths overnight. Worldwide, the death count has crossed 482,000, while cases exceeded 9.4 million. More in this report.
After an apparent downward trend, a second wave of COVID-19 infections in the US, Germany, South Korea, Australia and China has sent alarm bells ringing. In Latin America, the virus has been spiraling out of control as Brazil's death toll nears 54,000 and Mexico's tops 24. Meanwhile, New York, New Jersey and Connecticut have issued an advisory of 14-day quarantine for people coming in from states with high infections. COVID-19 hospitalizations and caseloads have also hit new record highs in more than half a dozen states of the U.S. Florida saw a record increase of over 5,500 new cases, along with Arizona, California, Mississippi and Nevada also having the highest surge.
I mean, what we're seeing in Florida is really rapid transmission in that 18 to 34 age group. And you're seeing a lot of cases come up. And granted, they weren't being tested at this level a couple months ago, but I also think they're testing positive at a higher and higher rate. So clearly, you have a lot of spread there.
Australia has sent troops to Melbourne, the country's second biggest city, to tackle COVID-19 cluster after it reported 33 new cases. But Prime Minister Scott Morrison says he is confident Australia can move ahead with easing restrictions as it can respond and deal with the outbreak. The World Health Organization, however, has warned the world faces a shortage of oxygen concentrators amid surging cases.
We expect to reach a total of 10 million cases within the next week. This is a sober reminder that even as we continue research into vaccines and therapeutics, we have an urgent responsibility to do everything we can with the tools we have now to suppress transmission and save lives.
MPs from South Asia are calling on leaders of the ASEAN to do more to help migrants, particularly Rohingya refugees. Meanwhile, China has increased daily nucleic acid testing capacity to more than 300,000 samples a day, compared with about 40,000 previously.
China has asked India to strictly observe and implement the consensus reached with Beijing during talks earlier this week. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said India should work with China and take real actions to restore peace and stability in the border areas. At a media briefing, Zhao said the incident in the Galwan Valley in the western section of the China-India boundary has received much attention. He said the Indian border troops crossed the line of actual control first and started provocations. Zhao said the Chinese and Indian foreign ministers agreed to cool down the situation on the ground as soon as possible. He said the both sides also agreed to strictly abide by bilateral agreements reached so far. The Afghan government says it has killed 25 Taliban fighters in an airstrike in northern Balkh province, but the Taliban claim Kabul's strike resulted in 4 civilian casualties. Balkh province governor's spokesperson said the security forces targeted a gathering of armed men. He emphasized there were no reports of civilian casualties. However, a Taliban spokesman said 2 children and a woman were among those killed in the strike on Khas Balkh district. He said the civilian houses were completely destroyed in the government's raids. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Washington has imposed sanctions on 5 Iranian ship captains for delivering oil to Venezuela. In a news conference, Pompeo said the ships delivered around 1.5 million barrels of Iranian gasoline and related components. He warned mariners against doing business with the Caracas government of President Nicolas Maduro. The Secretary of State said the U.S. continues to support Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido. The curbs are part of the U.S. effort to deter Tehran's support for Maduro, who last month defended the right to freely trade with Iran. The U.S. has formally asked the UN Security Council to extend an arms embargo on Iran beyond October. In a virtual meeting, U.S. envoy for Tehran, Brian Hook, said the Security Council should be united over its concern with Iranian arms transfers. Hook said the Council has maintained arms restrictions on Iran since 2007. A State Department statement said Hook briefed the Council on the full range of Iran's malign activity. The statement said Tehran has neither abided by current restrictions nor demonstrated a change in its threatening behavior. Earlier, in an interview, Hook threatened Russia and China of UN isolation if they will block a U.S. bid to extend a weapons ban on Iran. Tehran says Iran and Venezuela will not back down from countering unlawful American sanctions. In a tweet, Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Abbas Mousvi said U.S. desperate moves against Iranians signal failure of Washington's pressure. Venezuela's defense minister Vladimir Pedrino said a U.S. Navy operation near its coast is an act of provocation which will get a thumping response. While in a statement, U.S. Southern Command spokesperson Colonel Amanda Azubike said the Navy's operations were intended to preserve maritime navigation. Meanwhile, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has offered a referendum to authenticate his popularity and rule.
In 2022, on January 10th, the time period opens for those who want to collect signatures to call for a recall referendum against President Maduro. They will be free to go out in the streets and request signatures from the people. And if the people collect enough signatures for a recall referendum, like the Constitution demands, will go to a recall referendum to be measured at the ballot boxes, and it will be the people who decide.
The Saudi-led coalition has deployed war monitors to oversee a ceasefire between government forces and southern separatists in Yemen. The monitors arrived in southern Abyan province, where fighting has taken place between the two parties. Earlier this week, the coalition announced the ceasefire and said talks will take place soon in Riyadh. Coalition spokesman Colonel Turki al-Maliki said they will urgently work to bring back political and military committees to help make the Riyadh agreement last. Tensions had risen recently between the Yemeni government and the Southern Transitional Council on the island of Socotra. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has said it is up to Israel to decide whether to annex settlements in the West Bank. Speaking to reporters, Pompeo said extending Israeli sovereignty was a decision for them to make. Pompeo's comments came after senior aides to President Donald Trump met for a second day to discuss giving Israel a green light for the annexation. Yesterday, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged Israel to abandon annexation plans. He said the annexation will constitute a more serious violation of international law and grievously harm the prospect of a two-state solution.
I urge Israeli and Palestinian leaders to commit to meaningful dialogue with the support of the international community. I encourage regional and international supporters of the two-state solution to help bring the parties back to a path towards a negotiated, peaceful settlement.
Meanwhile, Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki said Israel thinks that it cannot be held accountable and is beyond all the laws. Now moving on, Turkey says it has killed 5 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in airstrikes during Operation Claw Tiger in northern Iraq. The National Defense Ministry said military operations backed by air power were carried out in the Haftanin region. The ministry said Turkey will continue to destroy weapon caches and shelters used by the terrorists. It said over 400 Kurdish militants have been killed in northern Iraq over the past 5 months. State media said PKK militants often use northern Iraq to plan cross-border terrorist attacks in Turkey. Turkey holds the PKK responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year terror campaign. Italy says Rome and Ankara have agreed to resume the political process and foreign interference, to end the foreign interference rather in Libya. Italian Foreign Minister Luigi Di Maio made an unannounced visit to Libyan capital Tripoli, where he held talks with Prime Minister Faisal Sarraj. Di Maio's visit came weeks after government forces repelled a 14-month-long offensive by Khalifa Haftar. Speaking to reporters on his return to Rome, Di Maio said he conveyed al-Sarraj about Italy's concerns over a possible attack on the strategic city of Sarat. He said a continuation of the conflict will lead to a de facto division of the country. Meanwhile, Libya's eastern-based parliament speaker has urged Egypt to intervene militarily over GNA's probable attack on Sarat. In an interview, Aguila Saleh said an Egyptian intervention in Libya will be legitimate if the terrorists and armed militias cross the deadline. France has called on the European Union to hold urgent talks on the bloc's future relations with Turkey. Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian said the bloc must firmly defend its own interests. The minister told lawmakers the bloc needs clarifications on Turkey's involvement in Libya. He added the situation in Libya is becoming similar to that of Syria. Ties between NATO allies, France and Turkey have soured in recent weeks. Paris has criticized Ankara's support for Libya's UN-backed government and its role in the Syria conflict. Turkey's drilling operations in the eastern Mediterranean are also a point of contention. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. 170 signatories of the UN have endorsed its call to silence the guns, saying the bloc stands united against the global threat of COVID-19 pandemic. In a statement, UN said the initiative, prompted by Malaysia, shows that a large majority of nations are now backing the global ceasefire. The statement said Secretary General Antonio Guterres made the call in March when the pandemic was just picking up speed. It said every country must muster all the efforts to save lives and alleviate social and economic devastation on their people. The signatories underscored that the diplomatic action and collective efforts are needed in the common fight against COVID-19. The US and South Korea have asked North Korea to abide by 2018 agreements signed for peace on the Korean Peninsula. South's Defense Minister Jong Kyung-do and US Secretary of Defense Mark Esper said they will continue diplomacy to completely denuclearize Pyongyang. In a joint statement marking the 70th anniversary of the 1953 Korean War, both the sides said they will continue a firm and combined defense posture. Secretary Esper affirmed Seoul the US's commitment to the defense of South Korea. The two leaders pledged to further strengthen their alliance to overcome present and future challenges. They asserted that both countries will continue information sharing, high-level policy consultation, and combined military exercises. US President Donald Trump says he will sign a defense cooperation agreement with Poland's President Andrzej Duda. This comes after Trump hosted Duda at the White House for the first time since the coronavirus pandemic led to a global shutdown. In a joint news conference, Trump said last year both countries signed 2 declarations to increase security collaboration. Duda also welcomed the new agreement, saying it is very important to European security and to Poland's security in particular. He said there is a possibility more US troops will be sent to Poland than agreed on previously. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani has called for the reopening of the border with Pakistan. While receiving the credentials of new Pakistani envoy Rahim Hayat Qureshi, Rouhani urged promoting bilateral ties in all affairs. The Iran state media said Rouhani also called for the implementation of the bilateral agreements, while Pakistan's ambassador Qureshi said that ties with Iran are of great importance to Islamabad. He said Pakistan will continue supporting Iran in the international arena. The vote on amendments to Russia's constitution has begun in all the 14 administrative regions of the country's far eastern federal district. The ballot on reforms will go on for 7 days and can clear the way for President Vladimir Putin to stay in Kremlin until 2036 if re-elected. Russia's easternmost region of Kamchatka and Chukovo were the first to begin the vote. Regional election commissions said voting is underway in 816 polling stations in the Yakutia region as well as Buryatia, Transbaikal and Moscow. Authorities say they have taken all the necessary safety precautions amid pandemic. On March 11th, the Russian State Duma approved the final reading of the constitutional amendment bill proposed by Putin. In the US, hundreds of protesters have occupied space outside New York City Hall to demand a $1 billion cut from the police department budget. Protesters said they will continue occupying City Hall Park until NYPD's $6 billion budget is reduced. City's Mayor Bill de Blasio has pledged to cut police budget. Blasio said City Council intends to ensure safety with fairness and justice. Meanwhile, Police Chief in Tucson, Arizona has offered to resign after he released a video showing custodial death of a Latino. This follows weeks of protests demanding police departments to be overhauled, defunded to stop officers killing unarmed people of color.
To demonstrate my willingness to take accountability for these mistakes, I am offering my resignation to the mayor, city council, and city manager, which they can accept or handle as they deem appropriate.
In the US, President Donald Trump's administration says top Chinese firms, including telecom giant Huawei, are controlled by the Chinese military. This was revealed in a document of Defense Department which lists 20 companies operating in the US allegedly backed by People's Liberation Army. The list also features video surveillance firm Hikvision, China Telecoms, China Mobile, and AVIC. The list will lay the groundwork for new US financial sanctions against the firms. Pentagon's designations do not trigger penalties but can lead to imposition of sanctions, may include blocking all property of listed parties. White House has already taken several steps against Chinese firms, including barring US companies from selling them certain technology without permission. The Special Prosecutor's Office in The Hague has indicted Kosovo President Hashim Thaçi for alleged war crimes. In a statement, the prosecutor's office said the accused is also responsible for nearly 100 murders. It said Thaçi and 9 others also face charges of torture, persecution, and enforced disappearances. The officials described the indictment a result of a lengthy investigation. The office said the former Speaker of Kosovo's parliament, Kadri Veseli, has also been indicted. Less than a year ago, Kosovo's Premier, Ramush Hadranac, resigned after he was summoned by the same court on suspicion of war crimes. In Congo, clashes between protesters and police have escalated. Police fired tear gas to break up violent protests outside parliament over proposed changes in the judiciary. The change in laws will transfer responsibility for prosecutors from the tribunal to the Justice Ministry. The demonstrators, some armed with petrol bombs, blocked traffic outside Parliament in the Kinshasa, creating barriers and burning tires. The protesters were mainly motorcycle taxi drivers and supporters of President Felix Tshisekedi.
We will fight to the end to protect the independence of the judicial system. Etienne Tshisekedi, President Felix Tshisekedi's father and UDPS founder, told us to take responsibility, so we sent our members to the parliament to vote for us.
U.S. Energy Information Administration says the country's crude oil production increased during the week ending June 19th. AIA's data showed last week oil production increased by 500,000 barrels per day and averaged at 11 million barrels per day. Oil prices fell noticeably after data showed another weekly increase in the U.S. stockpiles. U.S. West Texas Intermediate price shed over $2 to settle lower than $38 a barrel on the New York Mercantile Exchange, while Brent crude price sank over $2 to close below $40 a barrel on the London ICE Futures Exchange. European stock markets are trying to recover after falling over IMF's further cut in global economic growth forecast. Investors are pushing a fresh rally over hopes of revival of economic activity as most of the regional countries have eased lockdown restrictions. Frankfurt's DAX is trading nearly 1% higher. German airline Lufthansa stocks climbed 13.5% after its major shareholder bagged nearly $10 billion government bailout. CAC 40 in Paris has recovered fractionally after falling hard, while London's FTSE 100 is trading flat. In Asia, Seoul's Kospi led the losses, closing over 2% lower, while Nikkei 225 lost over 1%. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus Special.